When my son told me I wasn't welcome at his Christmas dinner, I smiled, walked to my car, and made 3 phone calls. By Valentine's Day, I was moving into a $2.4 million mansion while they were getting eviction notices, and that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice has no expiration date, and arrogance always comes with a bill. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. This story starts 6 months before Christmas, in my old split-level house on Maple Street. The house where I raised Jason, where his mother and I built 30 years of memories, where I thought I'd grow old surrounded by grandchildren's laughter. That was before I discovered what my son really thought of me. I was sitting at my kitchen table, same table where I'd helped Jason with homework every night for 12 years, reviewing my financial portfolio on my laptop. Real estate investments, stock dividends, business profits from my construction company, 3 decades of smart decisions that had built me a net worth of $4.8 million. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but calloused hands and a refusal to quit. Jason walked in like he owned the place, which technically he thought he would someday. He'd been dropping hints for months about the family house and keeping things in the family. I looked up from my screen, watching my only child fidget with his wedding ring, the same nervous tell he'd had since he was 8 years old. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from me. The chair his mother used to sit in during our morning coffee ritual, back when family meant something sacred instead of something transactional. I closed my laptop, giving him my full attention the way I always had, the way a father should. "What's on your mind, son?" He took a breath, glanced around the kitchen like he was memorizing it for an appraisal, then hit me with words that would change everything between us forever. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we think it would be better if you didn't come to Christmas dinner this year." The silence stretched between us like a chasm opening in the earth. I blinked, certain I'd misheard, certain that the son I'd sacrificed everything for couldn't possibly be uninviting me from the family Christmas we'd celebrated in this very house for 3 decades. "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" His face flushed red, but his voice stayed steady, rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech in the mirror. "Jessica's parents are coming, and they'd prefer a more intimate family gathering. You know how her dad gets around. Well, around people who remind him of work. People who remind him of work." That was the moment I understood that to my son's wife and her family, I wasn't Jason's father. I was just some blue-collar contractor who made them uncomfortable with my rough hands and honest opinions. I was a reminder of a world they'd left behind in their climb toward respectability. That was the moment I decided to show them exactly what a working man with 40 years of smart investments could really do. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. Sometimes it's getting magnificent. If you want to see how this $1 million revenge unfolds, subscribe and hit the bell icon. You won't want to miss what happens when old money meets new money. Like this video if you're ready for some serious justice. Now, here's where the real humiliation began. I stared at Jason for a full 10 seconds, watching him avoid my eyes like a guilty child caught stealing cookies. This was my son, the boy I'd carried on my shoulders to every little league game, whose college tuition I'd paid without blinking, whose wedding I'd funded because every princess deserves her dream day. This was the man telling me I wasn't good enough for Christmas dinner. "People who remind him of work," I repeated slowly, tasting each word like poison. "And what exactly does that mean, Jason?" He shifted uncomfortably, his expensive watch catching the afternoon light streaming through the kitchen window. That watch had been my gift for his promotion last year. $8,000 worth of Swiss precision that apparently didn't buy enough respect to include me in family holidays. "Dad, you know how Jessica's dad is. He's very particular about social situations. He worked his whole life to get away from construction and blue-collar stuff, and having you there just makes things awkward for everyone." The words hit like physical blows. Blue-collar stuff. As if the man who'd built half the commercial buildings in this town, who'd employed hundreds of people, who'd created generational wealth through sweat and strategic thinking, was just blue-collar stuff. And Jessica agrees with this assessment? It was actually her idea, Jason said. And there it was. The truth wrapped in shame and delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in their privileged life. She thinks it would be more comfortable for her family if it was just their kind of people. Their kind of people. I looked around my kitchen, at the granite countertops I'd installed myself, at the custom cabinets I'd designed and built, at the house I'd paid off 15 years early through 70-hour work weeks and financial discipline these people could never understand. So, where exactly am I supposed to spend Christmas, son? Maybe you could visit Uncle Dave, or we could do something the weekend after. Make it special, just you and me. His voice got smaller with each word, like he was disappearing into himself, becoming the weak man he'd apparently always been beneath the confident exterior I'd helped him build. I stood up slowly, my 62-year-old knees protesting after a lifetime of honest work. I walked to the window and looked out at my perfectly maintained yard, at the neighborhood I'd helped gentrify through careful property investments and community involvement. "Get out of my house," I said quietly, not turning around. "Dad, come on. Don't be dramatic about this." I turned to face him, and something in my expression made him take a step backward. "Get out of my house, Jason. And when you're ready to explain to Jessica's daddy exactly how a blue-collar guy managed to accumulate more wealth than his entire family combined, you let me know." He left without another word, and I watched through my front window as he drove away in the BMW I'd helped him finance. That was the last time he'd see the inside of this house. Because by Christmas, I was going to own something that would make their little suburban colonial look like a tool shed. Some lessons can only be taught with shock and awe. After Jason left, I sat at my kitchen table and did what every successful businessman does when facing a crisis. I assessed my assets. I pulled out my laptop and started making lists. Real lists, with numbers that would make Jessica's banking family reassess exactly who they'd decided to exclude from their refined social circle. First, the direct investments in Jason's life. His college education at the University of Washington, $127,000 over 4 years. I'd written every check personally, never asking him to take loans or work part-time jobs like I had. Graduate school for his MBA, another $89,000. His first apartment deposit when he landed his job in marketing, $15,000. The down payment on his house, $75,000 cash, handed over without hesitation because young families need a good start. Then came the wedding costs. Jessica's dream wedding at the Four Seasons had cost me $64,000. The honeymoon in Europe, $18,000. The furniture for their new house, because starting fresh requires quality pieces, $23,000. Every check written with love, with pride, with the belief that I was investing in my family's future. But that was just the direct cash. I pulled up my business records and started calculating the real numbers. The construction contracts I'd steered toward Jason's marketing firm, $340,000 in commissions over 3 years. The networking connections I'd provided, introducing him to clients who trusted my reputation enough to try his services. Immeasurable, but worth at least another 6 figures in business opportunities. The gifts, the small favors, the times I'd covered their vacations when money was tight. Another $45,000 scattered across 5 years of trying to be the generous father and father-in-law. The emergency car repair when Jessica crashed her Lexus. $12,000 for a paint job that cost more than most people's annual salary. Grand total, $808,000 in direct financial support, plus business opportunities worth another $400,000. I'd handed my son and his wife over $1 million in value across 7 years, and their gratitude was to exclude me from Christmas dinner because my blue-collar background embarrassed Jessica's daddy. I leaned back in my chair and did another calculation. My current net worth, $4.8 million in liquid assets, plus property values of $2.1 million, plus business equity of $1.4 million. Total wealth, $8.3 million. More money than Jessica's entire family had ever seen, much less earned through their own efforts. For the first time since Jason's devastating announcement, I smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes with understanding exactly how to solve a problem. These people thought they were excluding some poor working-class grandfather from their sophisticated celebration. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who could buy and sell their entire social circle before lunch. I opened my laptop and started browsing luxury real estate listings. If Jessica's family wanted to play games about who belonged in which social class, I was about to give them a masterclass in what real wealth looked like. Sometimes the best way to handle exclusion is to elevate yourself so far above your critics that they need a telescope to see you. The lesson was about to begin, and tuition was going to be very, very expensive. The next day brought clarity in the worst possible way. I was having coffee at Henderson's Diner, the place where every major business deal in this town gets discussed over eggs and honest conversation, when I overheard exactly what Jessica's family really thought of me. 2 tables over, Margaret Whitman was holding court with her book club ladies, and her voice carried that particular tone wealthy women use when they think they're being discreet, but actually want everyone to hear their gossip. "Well, of course Jessica doesn't want him there for Christmas," Margaret was saying, cutting her eggs Benedict with surgical precision. "The poor girl has worked so hard to establish herself in proper society, and then she has to deal with Jason's father showing up in his work boots and talking about construction projects." Linda Morrison, Margaret's closest friend and the town's unofficial social coordinator, nodded sympathetically. "I heard he actually built that house they live in himself. Can you imagine? All that sawdust and noise like some common laborer." "That's exactly my point," Margaret continued. "Jessica's father spent his entire career at the bank, climbing the social ladder, establishing the family name. Now he has to pretend that blue-collar construction worker is somehow equal to their family's standing in the community." My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. Construction worker. As if owning the largest construction company in 3 counties, as if employing 150 people, as if building the very bank where Jessica's father worked, somehow made me a common laborer, unworthy of sharing a meal with their refined family. "And the way he talks," Linda added with a theatrical shudder, "so loud and direct, no appreciation for subtlety or proper conversation. Jessica says he actually argues with her father about business, like he thinks he knows better than a man with an economics degree." I set down my cup and listened as these 2 women, whose husbands I'd made wealthy through construction contracts and property development deals, discussed me like I was some embarrassing relative who'd wandered in from the wrong side of town. "The worst part," Margaret concluded, "is that he doesn't seem to understand his place. Jessica says he acts like he belongs at their dinner table, like his money somehow makes him equal to people with real education and breeding. Real education and breeding. I'd built an empire while Jessica's father shuffled papers in a bank I'd helped construct. I'd created wealth while these women inherited it from husbands who'd never risked $1 of their own money on anything more dangerous than municipal bonds." I left a $20 tip and walked out, my mind spinning with the realization that this wasn't just about Christmas dinner. This was about a social hierarchy these people had constructed, where old money and college degrees mattered more than actual achievement, where inherited respectability trumped earned success. They wanted to exclude me because I reminded them of something they'd spent their lives trying to forget. That real wealth comes from real work, not trust funds and family connections. Well, if they wanted to see what real money could do, I was about to give them a demonstration they'd never forget. Sometimes the best way to crash a party is to throw a better one. I drove home from Henderson's Diner with my mind crystal clear for the first time in months. The fog of hurt and confusion had lifted, replaced by the cold precision that had made me millions in business. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about respect, and respect is something you take when people refuse to give it freely. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the house I'd built with my own hands 30 years ago. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, one of 800 square feet of solid construction and practical design. It had served its purpose, had been enough when enough was all I thought I needed, but enough doesn't command respect from people who measure worth by square footage and postal codes. Inside, I went straight to my home office and opened my laptop. The real estate website showed properties in the price range I'd been dreaming about but never seriously considering. Until now. Now those dreams had become necessities, strategic purchases in a war I hadn't started but fully intended to win. There it was on page 3 of luxury listings, 1247 Riverview Manor Drive, sitting on 5 acres of prime waterfront property in the most exclusive neighborhood in the county. 8 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, 7,500 square feet of European-inspired architecture that looked like it belonged in a magazine about how billionaires live. The price tag made me whistle. $2. $4 million, which meant I could buy it in cash and still have enough left over to furnish it with the kind of pieces that would make Jessica's Four Seasons wedding look like a backyard barbecue. I called the listing agent immediately. Margaret Chen answered on the second ring with the professional warmth that high-end realtors perfect for clients who can afford to buy houses the way other people buy cars. Mr. Johnson, I'm very interested in the Riverview property, I said, using the business voice that had closed $100 million construction contracts. I'd like to arrange a viewing for this afternoon. Certainly, sir. Might I ask if you've been pre-approved for financing? I smiled at the phone. I'll be paying cash, Ms. Chen. How quickly could we close if I decide to make an offer? The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know about how rarely she heard those words. Cash? Well, if all inspections clear and title work proceeds smoothly, we could potentially close in 30 days. Make it 3 weeks, I said. I want to be moved in before Christmas. After hanging up, I leaned back in my desk chair and looked around my modest office. The framed photos of construction projects, the certificates and awards from the Chamber of Commerce, the handwritten thank you letters from clients whose buildings I'd completed on time and under budget. Evidence of a life spent building things that lasted, creating value through honest work and smart decisions. Jessica's family thought they could exclude me because I wasn't refined enough for their standards. They were about to learn that refinement is something you can buy, but class is something you either have or you don't. And real class doesn't exclude family from Christmas dinner because of where they came from. 3 days later, I had the keys to my new mansion and a plan that would make Jessica's Christmas exclusion look like a strategic error of epic proportions. But first, I had some immediate satisfaction to arrange. Jason called that Wednesday evening, his voice carrying that careful tone people use when they know they've screwed up but aren't quite ready to admit it. Dad, listen. I've been thinking about what happened the other day. Maybe we could work something out for Christmas. You know, have you over for dessert or coffee after dinner? Dessert. After the real family had finished their refined meal, I could come by for the scraps, like a dog being thrown bones from the master's table. That's very generous of you, Jason, I said, standing in the marble foyer of my new house while contractors installed custom lighting fixtures that cost more than most people's cars. But I'm afraid I won't be available. What do you mean you won't be available? It's Christmas. I'll be hosting my own Christmas celebration, a little gathering I'm putting together for people who actually appreciate my company. The silence stretched long enough for me to walk to my new floor-to-ceiling windows and look out at my 5 acres of professionally landscaped grounds. The view stretched to the river, where my private dock could accommodate the yacht I was considering purchasing just because I could. Dad, are you okay? You sound different. I sound like a man who's finally learned the difference between family and people who pretend to be family when they need something. I walked through my new great room, where the cathedral ceilings and custom millwork made Jason's suburban colonial look like a starter home for college students. Look, if this is about Jessica's family, I can talk to them. Maybe we can find a compromise. A compromise? I laughed, the sound echoing beautifully in my new space. Jason, I've moved past the need for compromises. I've found a much better solution to the problem of people who don't appreciate what they have. What kind of solution? The kind where I stop pretending that blood relation automatically equals respect. The kind where I stop making excuses for people who find me embarrassing. The kind where I start surrounding myself with people who understand the difference between wealth and class. I could hear Jessica's voice in the background. probably asking what I was talking about, probably starting to suspect that her social calculation might have been spectacularly wrong. "Dad, you're scaring me a little. What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that Christmas dinner is off the table permanently, son. Not just this year, every year. Because I've realized that trying to earn the respect of people who look down on you is like trying to teach pigs to sing. It wastes your time and annoys the pigs." I hung up and walked to my new master suite, where the bedroom alone was larger than the entire first floor of Jason's house. Tomorrow, the interior decorator would arrive to begin the process of creating something so magnificent that Jessica's refined family would need to invent new words for envy. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's becoming so successful that your critics have to pretend they never knew you. The interior designer arrived Thursday morning in a Mercedes that cost more than most people's annual salary, and her portfolio made it clear that I was about to create something that would be remembered in this town for decades. "Mr. Johnson," Victoria Sterling said, setting her leather briefcase on my new granite kitchen island. "I understand you want something spectacular completed in record time." "Not spectacular," I corrected, pouring coffee from my new commercial-grade espresso machine. "I want something that redefines what people in this town think spectacular means. Money is no object. Timeline is 3 weeks. And the goal is to create something that makes the governor's mansion look modest." She smiled the way artists smile when someone hands them an unlimited budget and tells them to create a masterpiece. "I think we're going to work very well together." Over the next 6 hours, we planned an interior that would cost $400,000 and look like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Italian leather furniture, crystal chandeliers from Austria, Persian rugs worth more than luxury cars, artwork from galleries in New York and San Francisco. The great room would feature a custom stone fireplace large enough to roast a whole pig, surrounded by built-in bookcases filled with first-edition classics and business biographies. The dining room would seat 20 around a mahogany table crafted by artisans in North Carolina, with place settings of bone china and sterling silver that had been used by European royalty. The master suite would become a private retreat with a sitting area, a fireplace, and a bathroom featuring a marble-soaking tub large enough for 4 people, and a shower with more technology than most people's cars. "The home theater," Victoria said, sketching preliminary layouts, "should accommodate at least 15 people comfortably, with a projection system and sound quality that rivals commercial cinemas." "Make it 20, I said, "and include a wine cellar with climate control for at least 500 bottles. I want to be able to host tastings that people will talk about for years." By afternoon, we had architectural plans that would transform my mansion into something that belonged in lifestyles of the rich and famous rather than a small town in the Pacific Northwest. The kind of place where Fortune 500 CEOs would feel comfortable discussing billion-dollar deals over dinner. "There's one more thing," I told Victoria as she prepared to leave. "I want to host a Christmas party. Something elegant but not too formal, intimate but impressive. 200 guests, catered by the best restaurant in the state, with enough luxury to make people understand they're experiencing something exceptional. 200 guests in 3 weeks during Christmas season." She looked at me like I'd asked her to organize a moon landing. "Mr. Johnson, the logistics alone." "Victoria," I said, writing a check for her design retainer. "I've spent my career doing impossible things on impossible timelines. The difference between good contractors and great contractors isn't skill. It's the willingness to make the impossible happen when someone provides the right motivation." She looked at the check amount, and her expression shifted from skeptical to determined. "Consider it done." By Christmas, Jessica's family was going to understand exactly what kind of man they'd excluded from their dinner table. Building an empire of revenge requires the right people, and I'd spent 30 years in business learning exactly who to call when you need miracles delivered on impossible schedules. By Friday, I had an army of contractors, artisans, and service providers who understood that money talks but cash money screams. Tommy Rodriguez, my concrete guy for 15 years, brought a crew of 8 to install the outdoor kitchen and fire pit area, where I'd host summer gatherings that would make Jessica's backyard barbecues look like church picnics. "Mr. Johnson," he said, surveying the scope of work, "this is either the best midlife crisis I've ever seen, or you're planning something legendary." "Both," I replied, watching his crew mark out the footprint for a cooking area that would rival professional restaurants. "And Tommy?" "Bonus pay for everyone who helps me hit this timeline. I want this completed before Christmas." Next came Elena Vasquez, the best landscape architect in 3 states, who took one look at my 5 acres and started designing gardens that would bloom in sequential waves from March through October. "The lighting alone," she mused, sketching placement for pathway illumination that would showcase my property like a resort, "will cost more than most people's houses." "Good," I said. "I want people to see this place from the road and wonder who has enough money to live like European royalty in small-town Washington." The wine cellar required specialists from California, master craftsmen who understood that proper wine storage wasn't just about temperature control, but about creating an experience that would impress collectors who thought they'd seen everything. The temperature-controlled room would hold not just wine, but the kind of rare vintages that appear at auctions and cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. Then came the technology installation crew, led by Marcus Kim, who'd wired smart homes for tech billionaires in Seattle. "Sir," he said, reviewing my requirements for integrated sound, lighting, security, and entertainment systems. "This level of automation typically takes 3 months to program and test." "You have 3 weeks, I said, handing him a contract with penalty clauses for delays and bonus payments for early completion. "Whatever crew size you need, whatever overtime it takes, make it happen." But the crown jewel of my revenge operation was the catering contract with Lumiere, the 5-star restaurant that had hosted governors' dinners and celebrity weddings. Chef Antoine personally came to the house to discuss menu options that would redefine what people in this town thought fine dining could be. "For 200 guests, he said, examining my new kitchen with its commercial-grade appliances and prep space, "we will create something spectacular. French cuisine with Pacific Northwest influences, wine pairings that complement each course, service staff trained to European standards." I signed contracts that would have shocked my younger self, the careful man who'd counted every penny and planned every purchase. But that man had believed that modest success and family loyalty were enough. That man had been wrong. This wasn't about spending money. This was about demonstrating what real success looked like when it stopped apologizing for existing. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when someone starts spending money like they're trying to single-handedly stimulate the local economy. By Monday, my phone was ringing with calls from people who'd heard rumors about my construction project and wanted to know if the stories were true. The first call came from Beth Morrison, Linda's daughter-in-law, who worked at the bank where Jessica's father served on the board of directors. "Mr. Johnson, I hope you don't mind me calling," she said with the careful politeness people use when they're fishing for information they know they shouldn't have. "I heard you've been making some significant financial moves lately." "Just some home improvements," I said, watching through my windows as crews installed outdoor lighting that would illuminate my property like a luxury resort. "Nothing too dramatic. It's just that some of the amounts we've seen suggest more than typical home improvements. The talk around town is that you've purchased the Riverview property." I smiled at the phone. So the banking gossip network was already spreading the news through Jessica's family's social circle. Perfect. "Beth, you know I can't discuss specific financial transactions, banking privacy laws and all that." But the calls kept coming. Margaret Whitman's husband wanted to know if I needed additional property insurance for whatever project I was undertaking. The mayor's wife called to ask about permits for the construction activities neighbors had noticed. Jessica's hairdresser somehow got my number to inquire whether I might need household staff for my expanded living situation. The most interesting call came Wednesday afternoon from Jessica herself. She'd never called me directly before, had always communicated through Jason like I was some business associate rather than her father-in-law. "Mr. Johnson," she said, and I could hear the forced sweetness that meant she wanted something. "Jason told me you're doing some home renovations. I was wondering if we could stop by and see what you're working on. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Jessica. It's a construction zone right now, not safe for visitors. Well, maybe after Christmas, when things are finished. I'd love to see what you've done with the place. The irony was delicious. The same woman who'd found me too embarrassing to include in her Christmas dinner was now angling for an invitation to see my new house. The same woman who'd convinced my son that my blue-collar background made me unsuitable for refined company was suddenly interested in my home improvements. After Christmas might work, I said. Although I'm planning to be quite busy with holiday entertaining, I'm hosting a little Christmas celebration of my own. Oh, just family? Actually, I've invited quite a few people from around town. Business associates, community leaders, people who appreciate good hospitality. It should be quite an event. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Jessica was starting to realize that excluding me from her Christmas dinner might have been a strategic error of magnificent proportions. But it was too late for recalculations now. The game was already in motion, and I held all the winning cards. By Thursday, the local gossip network was working overtime, trying to piece together exactly what I was building, and the speculation was becoming more outrageous with each retelling. Perfect. Nothing builds anticipation like mystery combined with obvious wealth. I decided it was time to start dropping strategic hints that would ensure maximum impact when my Christmas party finally revealed the full scope of what I'd accomplished. The first step was a visit to Henderson's Diner during the breakfast rush, when all the town's power brokers gathered to discuss business over coffee and gossip. I walked in wearing a $3,000 Italian suit instead of my usual jeans and work shirt, and the conversations quieted as people tried to process this new version of the man they thought they knew. I took a seat at the counter where my voice would carry to every table in the place. "Morning, Helen," I said to the waitress who'd served me coffee for 15 years. "Just coffee today. I've got a meeting with the wine dealer from Portland about the cellar installation." The magic words, wine dealer and cellar installation, hit the morning crowd like breadcrumbs thrown to hungry geese. I could practically feel the ears perking up around the room. Margaret Whitman appeared at my elbow within minutes. "Robert, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you expanding your house?" "Something like that," I said, sipping my coffee with the casual attitude of someone who bought mansions the way other people bought groceries. I decided it was time to live a little more comfortably. You know what they say about life being too short to drink cheap wine. I had no idea you were interested in wine collecting. There's a lot about me people don't know, Margaret. 30 years of being too busy working to enjoy my success. But retirement is approaching, and I figure it's time to start entertaining properly. I could see her mental wheels turning, trying to reconcile the blue-collar contractor she thought she knew with someone who casually mentioned wine cellars and entertainment goals. "Will you be having a housewarming party?" "Christmas party, actually. Something elegant but not too stuffy. I'm thinking about 200 guests. Really show people how beautiful this area can be when you put some investment behind it." The number 200 guests dropped into the diner's morning buzz like a stone into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread from table to table. 200 guests meant serious money, serious planning, and serious social ambition. 200? Margaret's voice had climbed an octave. "That's quite an undertaking." "Well, when you decide to do something, might as well do it right." "I've invited the governor, the mayor, several business leaders from Seattle, some people from the construction industry who've helped make me successful over the years. Should be quite an evening." I left a $20 tip and walked out, knowing that within an hour, every person in Jessica's social circle would know that the blue-collar contractor they'd excluded from Christmas dinner was planning a party that would dwarf anything their refined little group had ever attempted. Phase 1 of the lesson was complete. Time for Phase 2. The final week before Christmas transformed my mansion into something that belonged in magazines about how billionaires entertain. Victoria's design team worked 18-hour days installing fixtures that had been expedited from dealers across the country, creating an interior that would redefine luxury for everyone who'd ever set foot in it. The great room now featured a stone fireplace surrounded by built-in bookcases filled with leather-bound classics, Italian furniture arranged for both intimate conversation and larger gatherings, and artwork that had been flown in from galleries in New York and Los Angeles. The crystal chandelier in the foyer alone cost more than most people's cars. Chef Antoine arrived with his catering team to transform my commercial-grade kitchen into a staging area for what he promised would be an evening of culinary artistry that will be discussed for years. The menu included Pacific Northwest salmon with French preparation techniques, locally sourced lamb with wine reductions, and dessert options that required specialized equipment his team had shipped from Portland. "Monsieur Johnson," he said, reviewing the final menu while his staff arranged serving stations. "This celebration will establish new standards for fine dining in your community. The wine pairings alone represent an investment that most restaurants cannot afford." The wine cellar was my personal masterpiece. 500 bottles of carefully selected vintages, including several that cost more per bottle than most people spent on a week's groceries. The temperature-controlled room featured tasting areas with professional lighting and comfortable seating for smaller, more intimate gatherings. Marcus Kim's technology team had created an entertainment system that would allow me to control lighting, music, and visual presentations throughout the house from a single tablet. "Sir," he said, demonstrating the integrated systems, "you can now orchestrate the entire evening's atmosphere with the touch of a button." Lighting that adjusts automatically as evening progresses, sound systems that can provide background music or full presentation capabilities, security systems that will document every moment of your celebration. But the coup de grace was the guest list itself. 200 carefully selected invitations had been sent to everyone who mattered in local business, politics, and society. The governor had confirmed his attendance, along with 3 state senators, the mayors of 4 neighboring cities, and business leaders whose net worth collectively measured in the billions. Most importantly, I'd made sure that several guests would be people from Jessica's social circle, not Jessica and Jason themselves, who notably had not received invitations, but their neighbors, their country club associates, and their church leaders. People who would attend my magnificent celebration and then spend the next year wondering how they'd so completely misjudged the man they'd thought was just a simple contractor. The evening would be documented by a professional photographer whose work appeared in Architectural Digest and Vanity Fair, ensuring that images of my celebration would circulate through social media and local publications for months to come. Jessica's family had wanted to exclude me because my blue-collar background wasn't refined enough for their standards. They were about to discover that refinement is just another thing money can buy, but class is something you either have or you don't. Christmas Eve arrived with crystal-clear skies and temperatures perfect for the kind of outdoor celebration that would be remembered for decades. My 5 acres had been transformed into something that looked like European royalty had decided to throw a party in the Pacific Northwest. Professional lighting illuminated my property like a luxury resort, with pathway lighting that guided guests from the circular driveway through gardens that would rival anything they'd seen at the governor's mansion. The outdoor kitchen glowed with warmth and activity as Chef Antoine's team prepared final courses for 200 guests who represented the true power structure of our region. I stood in my master suite, adjusting my $5,000 tuxedo and watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as cars began arriving. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, and Bentleys filled my circular driveway and overflow parking areas, each vehicle representing wealth and influence that Jessica's family could only dream of attracting to their modest suburban gatherings. The first guests included Governor Sarah Mitchell and her husband, whose presence alone would validate my position in society more effectively than any business achievement or financial statement ever could. Behind them came Seattle business leaders, whose decisions affected hundreds of thousands of jobs, followed by local power brokers who shaped policy and development throughout the region. I made my entrance at exactly 7 o'clock, walking down my grand staircase into a great room filled with conversations about stock options, real estate development, political campaigns, and business deals worth millions of dollars. These were my people now, not because of blood relation or social pretense, but because of shared success and mutual respect. "Robert," Governor Mitchell approached with the genuine warmth that successful people show each other. "This is absolutely magnificent. I had no idea you'd created something this spectacular." "Thank you, Governor." It seemed like time to start entertaining properly, to really show people what this region can offer when you combine natural beauty with thoughtful investment. Within an hour, my great room, dining room, and outdoor areas buzzed with the kind of conversation that shapes communities. State senators discussed infrastructure projects with construction industry leaders. Tech executives explored development opportunities with local government officials. Artists and gallery owners networked with collectors whose purchases could launch careers. The wine service alone would have impressed critics from Wine Spectator magazine. Bottles that cost $400 to $800 each, served by professional sommeliers who explained each vintage's significance to guests who understood the difference between expensive wine and truly exceptional wine. But the evening's most satisfying moment came at 8:30, when Margaret Whitman arrived with her husband and several couples from Jessica's church and social circle. I watched their faces as they processed the scope of what I'd created, saw the exact moment when they realized that every assumption they'd made about my social status and financial capacity had been spectacularly wrong. "Robert," Margaret said, her voice carrying a note of amazement that bordered on reverence, "I had no idea. I mean, this is extraordinary. Thank you, Margaret. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you stop worrying about other people's opinions and start focusing on your own standards." The evening's crescendo came at 9 o'clock, when I called for everyone's attention in the great room. 200 guests, representing more wealth and political influence than had ever been assembled in this region, quieted as I stood near my marble fireplace with a glass of wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Friends," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system Marcus had installed, "I want to thank you for joining me this Christmas Eve for what I hope will become an annual tradition of celebrating success, community, and the people who truly understand what family means." The pause that followed let those words sink in. Several guests who knew about my family situation exchanged glances, understanding that my emphasis on people who truly understand what family means was more than casual phrasing. Many of you know that I built my business from nothing, starting with calloused hands and a willingness to work harder than anyone thought possible. What some of you may not know is that success sometimes requires difficult decisions about who deserves to share in the benefits of that hard work. Governor Mitchell nodded approvingly, recognizing the tone of someone who'd learned hard lessons about trust and loyalty. Around the room, business leaders who'd built their own empires understood exactly what I was saying. Recently, I discovered that some people view blue-collar success as embarrassing, as something that needs to be hidden from polite society. I learned that there are individuals who believe that inherited respectability matters more than earned achievement. Margaret Whitman's face had gone pale. She knew. Several other guests from Jessica's social circle were beginning to understand that this magnificent celebration was more than a housewarming party. "I was excluded from a family Christmas dinner," I continued, "because my working-class background was deemed inappropriate for people with more refined sensibilities. Because my honest success made others uncomfortable about their inherited advantages." The silence in the room was absolute. 200 successful people, many of whom had built their own wealth from nothing, listened as I described the kind of social prejudice that every self-made person understood from personal experience. So I decided to host my own Christmas celebration, surrounded by people who understand that success earned through hard work and smart decisions deserves respect, not apologies. Senator Patricia Williams stepped forward, raising her wine glass. "Robert, anyone who doesn't appreciate what you've accomplished doesn't deserve a place at your table." The response was immediate and overwhelming. 200 glasses raised in a toast that celebrated not just my success, but the principle that achievement matters more than pedigree, that earned respect trumps inherited status. As the evening continued, guest after guest approached me with stories of their own experiences with social prejudice, with family members who'd tried to diminish their success, with people who'd underestimated their capabilities based on their backgrounds. By midnight, I'd been invited to join 3 exclusive business organizations, had been asked to serve on 2 non-profit boards, and had received preliminary discussions about real estate investment opportunities worth tens of millions of dollars. Jessica's family had excluded me from their small, petty celebration. In response, I'd created something magnificent. The fallout from my Christmas Eve celebration spread through the community's social networks like wildfire through dry timber. By New Year's Day, everyone who mattered in local society knew exactly what had happened, and the implications were devastating for Jessica's family's carefully constructed social position. The first crack appeared at the New Year's Eve party at the country club, where Margaret Whitman found herself defending her role in excluding me from Christmas dinner to people who'd attended my magnificent celebration just a week earlier. "I don't understand the big deal," Margaret said to Patricia Williams, not realizing that the senator had become one of my strongest supporters after our Christmas Eve conversation. "It was just a family dinner preference, not some kind of social statement." "Margaret," Patricia replied with the diplomatic chill that politicians use when they think someone is being deliberately obtuse, "excluding a man of Robert's stature from family gatherings because of his working-class background is exactly the kind of social statement that reflects poorly on everyone involved." The conversation spread throughout the evening, with each retelling making Jessica's family's behavior sound more petty, more embarrassing, more indicative of the worst kind of social climbing that successful people universally despise. Linda Morrison, who'd been present during Margaret's original gossip session about my blue-collar embarrassment, found herself on the defensive when several business leaders questioned how they'd so completely misjudged my financial capacity and social standing. "We had no idea he had that kind of wealth," Linda explained to Governor Mitchell's chief of staff, who'd been invited to my celebration and was now questioning the community's social dynamics. "He always seemed so modest." "Modest, successful people are often the most impressive," came the response. "It's the people who feel the need to constantly display their status, who usually have the least substance behind their claims." But the real damage came from Jessica's own church community, where several prominent members had attended my Christmas Eve celebration and returned with stories of European-quality wine service, museum-worthy artwork, and conversations with political leaders that most parishioners would never have access to. Within a week, Jessica and Jason found themselves excluded from dinner parties they'd previously been invited to automatically. Country club conversations quieted when they approached, not out of deliberate rudeness, but because people no longer saw them as worth including in discussions about business opportunities, political connections, or social events that required actual influence to access. The final blow came when Margaret Whitman's husband lost a major insurance contract with one of my business associates, who decided that anyone who participated in excluding me from family gatherings probably didn't understand the kind of loyalty that successful business relationships require. "It's not personal," the business leader explained when asked about the decision. "It's about working with people who understand respect and family values. If they'll treat their own father-in-law that way over social pretensions, how can I trust them to handle my business interests properly?" Jessica's carefully constructed climb towards social respectability had been replaced by a slide toward irrelevance, and everyone in town understood that the change was permanent. Their exclusion had become their exile. February brought consequences that went far beyond social embarrassment. Real financial repercussions that would reshape Jessica and Jason's life in ways they'd never anticipated when they decided my blue-collar background was too embarrassing for their refined Christmas dinner. The first blow came from Jason's employer, Henderson Marketing Associates, where his position had become increasingly precarious after several major clients decided they preferred working with firms that demonstrated better community relationships and family values. The construction industry, which had been Jason's most profitable client base, began directing their marketing budgets toward companies whose principals understood loyalty and respect. "I don't get it, Dad," Jason said during the phone call, where he explained his reduced commissions and hour cuts. "It's like everyone in the construction business decided to punish me for something I didn't even do to them." "You didn't do it to them," I replied, standing in my wine cellar where I was cataloging additions to my collection. You did it to me. And in small towns, word travels fast about how people treat family when they think no one important is watching. The second consequence hit Jessica directly. Her part-time job at the art gallery ended abruptly when the owner, who'd attended my Christmas Eve celebration, decided that someone who'd participated in excluding a major community supporter probably didn't understand the kind of client relationships that kept galleries profitable. "It's completely unfair," Jessica complained to Jason, not understanding that fairness had nothing to do with the natural consequences of social miscalculation. "I never did anything to hurt his business." But the most devastating blow came in March, when their mortgage lender initiated foreclosure proceedings after 3 missed payments. Without Jason's construction industry commissions and Jessica's gallery income, their monthly budget couldn't support the lifestyle they'd committed to when they thought my financial support would continue indefinitely. I learned about the foreclosure from my banker, the same institution where Jessica's father had spent his career shuffling papers and pretending that inherited respectability mattered more than actual achievement. "Mr. Johnson," Beth Morrison explained during our quarterly investment review, "I thought you should know that your son's family has received notice of default on their mortgage. They've requested information about refinancing options, but their current income doesn't support their existing debt levels." I sat in the bank's conference room, surrounded by statements showing investment returns that had grown substantially since I'd stopped subsidizing other people's fantasy lifestyles, and considered the irony of the situation. Jessica's father had worked his entire career in this building, had used his position to influence social hierarchies and exclude people he considered beneath his family's standards. Now his daughter was facing foreclosure while sitting across the desk from loans officers who reported to men who considered me a valued client and trusted business associate. "Has anyone from the family contacted me about this situation?" I asked. "Not directly, no, sir. But we understand there may be family considerations that could affect their options." I smiled, remembering the conversation where Jessica had explained that her parents expected more refined company for their Christmas dinner. "There are no family considerations, Beth. They made it very clear that we're not family. Let them solve their problems the same way they'd expect any stranger to solve them." 3 days after receiving the foreclosure notice, Jason appeared at my mansion's front door, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in 6 months. Gone was the confident young professional who'd excluded me from Christmas dinner. In his place stood someone who understood, finally, what it meant to lose everything because of arrogance and poor judgment. I opened the door to find him staring up at my European-inspired architecture with the expression of someone seeing clearly for the first time. His eyes took in the marble columns, the custom millwork, the professional landscaping that had transformed 5 acres into something that belonged in lifestyle magazines. "Jesus, Dad," he said quietly. "This place is incredible." "Thank you," I replied, not inviting him in immediately. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you stop spending money on people who don't appreciate it." He flinched like I'd slapped him, but didn't argue with the assessment. "Dad, can we talk? Please? I know I don't deserve it, but I need to explain some things." I stepped aside and led him through my foyer, watching his reaction to the crystal chandelier, the Italian marble floors, the artwork that had been featured in gallery exhibitions. Every detail was a reminder of the wealth he'd dismissed as insufficient for Jessica's family's standards. In my great room, he sat carefully on furniture that cost more than his monthly salary, looking around at surroundings that redefined everything he thought he knew about his father's financial capacity. "I'm losing the house," he said without preamble. "The foreclosure notice came Monday. 3 months behind on payments, and without your help we can't catch up." "I know," I said, settling into my leather chair with a brandy that cost more than most people spent on groceries. Small towns, remember? News travels fast, especially financial news. His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry about Christmas, about Jessica, about everything. I let them convince me that you weren't good enough for their family, when the truth is, I wasn't good enough for you." The admission hung in the air between us like smoke from my fireplace. Finally, honesty. Finally, recognition of what had really happened. "Go on," I said. Jessica's parents filled her head with ideas about social climbing and respectability, and I was too weak to stand up to them. I let them exclude you from our family because I thought their approval was worth more than your respect. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture that reminded me of the little boy who'd run to me for comfort after scraped knees and broken toys. "I lost everything, Dad. The business contacts you'd built for me over the years. They're all gone. Jessica's blaming me for the financial problems, saying I should have maintained better family relationships. Her parents won't help us because they say we created this mess ourselves." The irony was perfect. The same people who'd excluded me for being beneath their standards were now refusing to help their own daughter because maintaining appearances mattered more than family loyalty. I let Jason sit in the silence of my great room, surrounded by evidence of the success he'd dismissed as embarrassing, while I considered how to respond to his apology. Forgiveness was one thing. Restoration was something entirely different. "Jason," I said finally, "I forgive you. I forgave you months ago because staying angry would have hurt me more than it hurt you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were." His face showed hope mixed with confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean that respect, once lost, has to be earned back through actions, not words. Trust, once broken, has to be rebuilt through consistent behavior over time. And financial support, once rejected through social prejudice, doesn't get restored because the consequences become inconvenient." I stood and walked to my windows, looking out at grounds that represented what happened when someone stopped accepting scraps and started demanding respect. "For 5 years before Christmas, I supported your lifestyle without question. Helped with mortgage payments, covered emergency expenses, provided business connections that kept you financially stable. I did it because I loved you and believed that family helped family. I know, Dad, and I threw it all away for people who turned their backs on us the minute things got difficult. You didn't throw it away for them, son. You threw it away because you were embarrassed by me. Because a man who'd built wealth through construction work wasn't refined enough for your new social circle." The words hit him like physical blows. Good. Truth should hurt when it's been avoided for too long. That was Jessica's influence, not mine. "No," I said firmly, turning to face him. "Jessica didn't make that decision for you. You chose her prejudices over your father's feelings. You chose their social approval over my dignity. You made that choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." He was crying openly now, finally understanding that actions have permanent effects that apologies can't erase. "So what does this mean for us? For our relationship?" I sat back down, looking at this man I'd raised who'd somehow become a stranger, willing to exclude his own father for social acceptance. "It means we start over from zero. No assumptions about financial support, no expectations about family traditions, no automatic inclusion in each other's lives. If you want a relationship with me, you'll build it the same way strangers build relationships, through mutual respect, consistent behavior, and earned trust. And the house? The foreclosure? You'll figure it out the same way millions of people figure out financial problems, by cutting expenses, increasing income, and making adult decisions about what you can afford. Maybe you'll learn what I learned 30 years ago, that you can't live beyond your means and expect other people to subsidize your choices." He nodded slowly, finally understanding that the safety net he'd taken for granted was permanently gone. "Will you at least give me a chance to prove that I can be better?" "That's up to you," I said. "But it starts with respecting boundaries and understanding that love doesn't mean unlimited financial support. You know what? Family betrayal seems to be more common than we'd like to admit. Just like Robert learned that respect can't be demanded, only earned. Sometimes the people closest to us need to learn the hardest lessons." Speaking of family lessons, you need to hear what happened when another parent decided enough was enough. Check out this story playing right now about a daughter who took forgiveness for granted until Christmas morning arrived and her father was nowhere to be found. Trust me, If you thought Robert's revenge was satisfying, wait until you see what happens when expectations meet reality. The link is right there on your screen.